Hey folks, Keith here at Chicken Thigh Fishing. Today we are going to disassemble, clean, lubricate, and reassemble an SLX reel from Shimano. Now specifically, this is the SLX 150 XG, and the first step in our disassembly will be to remove the palm side plate. On the SLX, there's a switch underneath the palm side plate. You simply move that to the open position, and that allows you to swing the palm side plate open. Once you have that side plate open, you can remove the spool, and we will lay that aside. For the time being, I'm going to resecure the palm side plate, and we're going to move over to the handle side of the reel, where we will remove the handle assembly, the star drag, and the handle side plate. The first step in removing the handle assembly is the handle nut retainer screw, which secures the handle nut retainer to the handle itself. After the retaining screw, we can pop off the handle retainer. And next is the handle nut. Now, one very important thing you want to note about the handle nut on a bait casting reel is if you have a right-handed reel like this, it's perfectly normal. However, if you have a left-handed reel, that is to say that the handle is on the left side of the reel, then it's not right tight, left loose, it's opposite. So you want to be cognizant of that if you have a left-handed reel so you don't strip the nut removing it. So we'll remove this nut. And once you crack it, you can remove the rest of it by hand. After the nut is off, you can remove the handle. And now when you remove the handle, what you will find stuck to the back side of it usually is the handle washer. So if you take the handle off and you don't see the washer on the main gear shaft, it's because it's stuck to the back side of the handle by the oil and or dirt that are in there. So we'll put the handle and the handle washer aside, and now we will be able to remove the star drag. After the star drag, you can remove the star drag spring. So after we have the star drag and the star drag spring removed, we're going to remove the star drag nut. But prior to this, I'm going to suggest that you use something to prop up your reel so you can keep it from falling over and then having some washers fall off and losing the order that they come off in. Now this star drag nut unscrews, and you just unscrew it up the length of the gear shaft. And when you take that off, you want to check underneath it to see if anything is stuck to it. And in this case, one of the washers is in fact stuck to it. So I'm going to lay down the star drag nut. And then I'm going to lay down the washers in the same orientation that I removed them on. After this first washer, the next two washers are curved, so that becomes important. So you keep them in the same orientation. One is curved like this, one is curved like this, and they go together, and you have to make sure that you keep them in the same orientation when you remove them, when you clean them, and when you replace them. So now that we have the washers removed, we can go ahead and remove the handle side plate. And unlike the palm side plate, which has a release lever to release it, you remove the handle side plate by removing the screws. And now when I take the screws off, I'm going to lay them down in the same pattern in which they go on the handle side plate, in case any of them are different sizes, lengths, or diameters. So we want to make sure we put them in the correct holes when we reassemble. So I removed the two screws from the outside of the handle side plate, and I put them into position where they go. And now we're going to flip over to the inside of the handle side plate And now that I have the 2 screws from the front side and the 2 screws from the back side of the handle side plate, I am able to lift that off. And I'm going to prop this up once again. And so now on the handle side plate you will have the sleeve. The sleeve usually will be stuck in the clutch here, and you can just pop it out and remove that. Now on the sleeve, you want to note that one end is circular and the other end has 2 protrusions on it. And so you want to be cognizant of the orientation where that goes back down. The side with the 2 nubs goes down on reassembly. And so now we will take our handle side plate and put that over here along with our screws. And I know that these 2 screws go on the outside, and what I will do is take these 2 screws and face them that way to indicate to me that they go on the inside of the handle side plate. And you can see the difference in the sizes of the screws. So now once we have the handle side plate removed, this is a good time that you might want to take a photograph so you can see the orientation of the interior components. Then we are going to remove the screws from the yoke, after which we will remove the pinion gear and the yoke. Now the pinion gear and the yoke fit together, and you will notice that the pinion gear has a wider section and a thinner section. The wider section goes down into the gear hole and the thinner section goes up. And in the middle it has a groove, and that groove fits in to the yoke. So we have the pinion gear and the yoke. Now we can remove the drag washer and the main gear assembly. And when I lift that up, I'm going to put my finger underneath it because there are likely to be components stuck to the bottom side of the main gear. And so you will see here we have the ratchet and a drag washer. And I'm going to lay those down. And then from the top side, we will remove the washer assembly, which consists of a steel washer and a carbon washer, and then of course the main gear. After the main gear and the drag washer assembly, we are going to remove the main gear shaft and the bearing plate, which is held in by 2 screws. Once I have the 2 screws removed, I can go ahead and lift off the main gear shaft and the bearing plate. Underneath will be a bearing held in by an E-clip, and you don't need to break this down any further. You can if you like, but there's no need to because you can sufficiently clean and lubricate this with this gear shaft intact. So I always remove that as one complete unit. So now that we have the handle side plate and the internal components removed, I'm going to turn over and I'm going to reopen the palm side plate because I'm going to want to get to this screw here, which will help me remove the hood. Now once that screw is removed, I am able to remove the hood. The next thing we are going to do is remove the spring tension rod that secures the palm side plate. And the way we're going to do that is to remove this E-clip that is on a groove on the rod here. Now this is quite a small E-clip, and so what we're going to want to do is get a small implement in there and pop it off. But for obvious reasons, we want to make sure that we cup our hand over it when we pop it off, otherwise it could go flying. So I just popped that off, and you can see how small it is. Now once that E-clip is off, we can remove the palm side plate and the spring rod. So now our next order of business will be to remove the pillar here. Now the pillar can just be moved out like so and removed from the palm side of the reel. Now you want to be cognizant of the direction that it goes in. The pillar will only go in one way when it comes time for reassembly. And the reason for that is because it has a nub on the end of it, which is a smaller diameter than the rest of the rod itself. So therefore there are two different size holes. One hole to fit the whole diameter, and then another hole that you just seat that nub in, and so it's a smaller hole. So if you go to assemble this when it's time to reassemble and you try to put it in this way, it's not going to fit. So it only goes in and comes out one way. Now that we have that pillar removed, you can see that the level wind guide can freely move on the worm gear. And that's because that shaft goes right through a hole on this level wind guide that we will see in a couple of minutes. So the next thing we want to do is remove the level wind guide. We do that by removing the cap, which just needs to be loosened. Once the cap is removed, there will be a spacer on top of the pawl. And now you will have the pawl. Now the pawl is a piece of metal that has two ears on it, and those ears drop down into the grooves on the worm drive. And that's what engages the level wind guide to the worm drive. So now you can see that the level wind guide is free to move back and forth in both directions because it is no longer engaged with the worm drive. So now our next order of business will be to remove the worm drive itself and the worm drive tube. And in order to do that, we're going to have to remove the components on the palm side of the reel as well as the components on the handle side. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the handle side of the reel and remove the E-clip that is seated on top of the worm gear. Again, I'm going to put my screwdriver or sharp implement into one of the notches for the E-clip. I'm going to cover it with my hand and pop that E-clip off. Once that E-clip is off, I can remove the worm gear. And I can go to the palm side where there is another E-clip that I will do the same thing with. And now on the palm side we also have a washer. Now that we have both sides removed, we are able to remove the worm drive itself. So we're going to remove the worm drive from the handle side of the reel, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that down. Now I'm going to push the worm gear out the handle side, and as I do, you'll see that that frees up the level wind guide, and I can remove the level wind guide. Now the level wind guide has the large hole that accommodates the worm drive tube, and it has the smaller hole that accommodates the pillar. On the front face of it, the lower hole is where the pawl, the spacer, and the cap go, and the upper hole is your line guide, and that's where your line leaves your reel. So now I can remove the worm drive tube, and you will note that one end is lipped and the other end is not. And when we reassemble, we're going to make sure that the lipped end is on the handle side of the reel. And the reason that the lipped end is because that lip forms a cup to accept this plastic bearing. And the worm drive will go inside the worm drive tube. So that's as far as we need to disassemble this reel for an effective cleaning and lubrication. You can certainly break the reel down further than this. We've only disassembled approximately half of the parts in the reel. But it's not necessary to do that in order to get a good cleaning and lubrication. Now at this point in time, I would clean each and every part, and I would be careful to do so methodically and in an organized fashion so that I keep everything in the same order and that I keep everything in the same orientation that I laid it down in. However, I'm not going to clean these parts because this reel has already been cleaned, and I am disassembling this for the purpose of disassembling. If I were cleaning and lubricating, I would clean each part, make sure I get all the dirt, grime, old grease, and old oil off, and then I would lubricate it by greasing the gears and oiling the bearings. And then I would reassemble. However, since this reel has already been cleaned and lubricated, I'm just going to go ahead and get right back into the reassembly. For the reassembly, for the most part, we're going to do things in the reverse order that we did during the disassembly. So in order to reassemble, we're going to start off with the body of the reel and the front of it facing us. In the handle side, we are going to insert the worm drive tube with the lipped end out. That's the only way it will fit in. And when it's about halfway through, we're going to go ahead and attach the level wind guide. Once the level wind guide is on, all we have to do is make sure that we seat the other end of the worm drive tube into the corresponding hole on the other side of the reel. And you can generally feel and hear that kind of click into place. And during this assembly, that may pop out from time to time, but it's very easy to just put it back into place. You know it's in place when this end of the worm drive tube is flush with the body of the reel itself. So once I have the tube in, we're going to reinsert the worm drive itself and then the components on each side of it to secure the ends of it. So I'm going to go in the handle side. So now we will replace the plastic bushing. And on the handle side, we will replace the gear. And one side of the gear has a little lip on it, and that side goes down. And once you have that gear over the end of the worm drive, you can go ahead and put the E-clip in place, and we're going to pop that on using a flat screwdriver like so. But much like when we disassembled, we're going to make sure that we cover it with our hand so it doesn't go flying anywhere. And once it's on there, you can cup it with your hand and click it into place. And we can go ahead and replace the washer on the palm side. And then the E-clip that holds that washer into place. And we will just get that in a position to put it on, and we could go ahead and pop that on. So now we have the worm drive assembly attached, and we have the level wind guide back on, but you can see it's moving freely. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage the worm drive with the level wind guide, and we do that by replacing the pawl. Now the pawl has those two ears on the end of it that engage with the grooves in the worm drive. You place that in, and then all you need to do is turn this gear, and the ears on that pawl will find the grooves on the worm drive, and it will fall down into place. And once it does, you can replace the spacer that goes on top. And then you can replace the level wind cap. So I will take and snug that down a little bit, not too tight. Now you can see that the movement is limited on that level wind drive, and that's because the pawl inside here is engaged with the worm drive. Now what we're going to do next to secure the level wind is to reinsert the pillar. Now the pillar is going to go through on the palm side. It's going to go through the hole with the nubbed end first. And it's going to go through the smaller hole on the level wind guide, right in there, and then through to the other side, and it's going to seat into the corresponding hole on the handle side of the housing. And now if you tip this over, that pillar would fall out. So you want to put your finger on that until we're ready to secure it. What holds that in place is the hood. We are going to replace the hood and carefully fit that into position. And once the ears of that hood are in the grooves that it goes in, we can replace the hood screw. So now that the hood screw is reinstalled, the hood is in place, and we can go ahead and reassemble the palm side plate. Now the rod for the palm side plate will go through the hole on the palm side, and then through the hole on the handle side. And then we're going to replace that small E-clip that keeps that in place. So replacing this E-clip can be a little tricky because it is so small. And so you want to get that, you want to hold the palm side plate from behind and get that E-clip onto the groove on that shaft. And once it's on that groove, you can either push it on by hand or use your screwdriver to pop it into place. And you'll see that it is now in place on the groove. And so now that palm side plate remains attached again. So for the time being, I'm going to engage the palm side plate and close it so it's not hanging in my way while we replace the components on the handle side. So the first thing we are going to replace on the handle side is the main gear shaft. We will have oiled the bearing and replace it like so, lining up the holes for the two screws. And I will just make sure those screws are on snug. Now once we have the main gear shaft on, we can go ahead and replace the yoke and the pinion gear. So we're going to take the pinion gear with the wider side down, and we are going to mate that with the yoke, and then we can put the yoke onto the yoke posts and seat that down onto those posts so that the posts are sticking up in order to accommodate the yoke springs. Now you want to be careful to make sure you put those yoke springs back on, because on many times when I'm in a hurry, I have put the springs aside, put my whole reel back together, only to see two springs sitting in the corner of my work area when I was done, and then I had to disassemble again all the way just to put those springs on those yoke posts. So always remember to put the springs back onto the yoke posts. After that, we can go for the drag washer and main gear assembly, beginning with the ratchet. After the ratchet goes the carbon fiber washer and then the main gear. And when you put the main gear on, it's going to mesh with the pinion gear, as you can see there. And the washer inside the main gear, and the final drag washer. And here, if I were putting new grease on here, here is where I would put new grease on the pinion gear and the main gear. Now I will replace the sleeve, and remember the sleeve has two ears on one end, and those ears go down, and they fit into the slots on that washer. And we are now ready to replace the handle side plate. So we will put the handle side plate into place and then replace the screws in the same pattern that we removed them, so we're sure to put them in the correct holes. And now that we have the handle side plate on, we can go ahead and replace the washers in the same orientation that we removed and cleaned them on. We'll start with those curved washers, and then the flat washer, and then we can rethread the star drag nut. Now as that star drag nut gets down there, it's going to want to move the level wind guide. So all you got to do is keep that in place with your finger, and that will allow you to bring that down further. Once the nut is on, we can replace the spring, and once the spring is on, we can replace the star drag. Now holding the star drag in place on top of the spring, you want to fit it down over the rectangular shape of the main gear shaft, and you can replace the handle washer and then the handle. And once the handle is in place, we can replace the handle nut. Now the handle nut we will take and snug that down. We're not going to go too tight, but we want to get it snugged down. And then we're going to take the handle nut retainer and line up the hole on the handle with the hole on the retainer. Which will allow us to reinsert the handle nut retainer screw. Now the last thing we're going to need to do is go back over to the palm side, click it open, and insert our spool. And then we can close the palm side plate and click the lever closed. And there you have it. Clean, quiet, smooth, ready to go. Well, I hope this video was a help to you if you own a Shimano SLX 150 XG. Although we didn't actually clean the parts because they didn't need cleaning, I hope the disassembly and the reassembly helped you so you can do this on your own, save yourself some time and money from bringing it somewhere or shipping it somewhere else to have it cleaned and lubricated. After you do this a few times, you'll get it down. Just take your time, do it methodically, and do it organized, and you won't have any problems. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of Chicken Thigh Fishing. We'll see you next time. Stay fishing, my friends.